Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, I am your host, RiotKitty. Wait a minute, I forgot the hat. 1 second. There we go. Anyways, this is the start of my RWBY rewrite videos, which I have dubbed RiotRWBY. First on the menu is RiotRWBY the chopping block, where I will be changing and whittling down the cast of RWBY to a much more manageable size for my rewrite. Just a video to kind of get my feet wet, as I have never done anything like this before. Fair warning, if you have not watched the show RWBY made by Rooster Teeth Animation, then this video might make no sense. I will be going over the world of RiotRWBY in a later video, so if you haven't watched the show, then I suggest start with that. Now that I've given my warning, let's go. Off to the chopping block of RiotRWBY we go. So, RWBY. I've made it clear in the past that I do not like the direction that the show is going in. From the story to the designs, and especially the characters. And lots of elements just flat out don't make sense. So this is what I would do with the show RWBY in a super hypothetical situation where Rooster Teeth would hand this small kitty the rights or whatever. Before I even dropped the show, I could see that RWBY had one major problem from almost the very beginning. It has too many characters. Characters that didn't need to exist. Characters that were misused. Shot in an alleyway like dogs. Or just characters that are simply walking contradictions. I shall have none of that in my rewrite. By cutting out existing characters, changing some, adding new ones, and even turning one into a baby. Although first off, we will start with the titular heroes of this show. So, Ruby Rose. She will have a different weapon starting off in RiotRWBY. Yep, no more Crescentras for Ruby, at least not yet. This is her new weapon, Muera Rose. It's an imitation of the weapon her mom, Summer Rose, used to use when she was alive. With this change, Ruby also gets Crescent Rose while she's training with Crow in volumes 4 and 5. Because I really wanted to see that in the actual show, and give Ruby a nice arc about becoming her own huntress. As for personality-wise, she's now more quiet and reserved than she was in the earlier volumes. And absolutely strays from any sort of social conflict. She's a combat prodigy, but in terms of anything social, she absolutely sucks. A good example would be when she stumbles into Weiss's suitcases in Volume 1. While Weiss is yelling at her, Ruby just sits there and takes it, waiting for the conflict to go away. Since from personal life experience, that's how she's been taught. But I'll get into that later. This personality flaw of hers gets even more noticeable. After stopping some bad guys, she gets extended an invitation to Beacon Academy by a headmaster Ozpin who is impressed with her skills, and then is made team leader of a team containing 3 other girls who have decided they all hate each other's guts. So RWBY must learn how to be a better leader and get out of her own headspace. There is one other major change to RWBY, and that is there are no longer Silver Eyes existing in the world of Remnant. She will instead be given a different ability, one that might sound familiar, but I will save that for a different time. I just think the world of Remnant is better off without a bona fide flashlight. Now, next character. Weiss is not exactly in the best spot during the beginning of RiotRWBY. After falling victim to an incident where her and her entire family were chopped into pieces by a deranged serial killer known only as the Butcher, little Weiss unfortunately had to go through multiple surgeries in order to repair her body and face. Because of this, Weiss does not like to be helped whatsoever, and this creates problems within Team RWBY. Even though her entire family survived that awful night, Weiss still desired revenge. So thus she decides to be a huntress in the hopes that one day she will find and kill him. Even though Weiss knows perfectly well that subjecting herself to this kind of lifestyle means that one day her body will give out. Heck, even her father Jocks encouraged this mentality, wanting to teach his child the cruelty of the world. Anyways, because the Butcher was wearing a white Fang mask, Weiss began to subconsciously lump all Faunus with him, and the White Fang as a whole. Basically, if you meet Weiss, you have to prove that you're better than them. If you're Faunus, that is, which is certainly a twisted mentality to have. Because of this, she already rubs off the wrong way on Blake with her own preconceived notions, and pisses off Yang by pressing all the wrong buttons because she has already decided that Yang is not worth being nice to. Yep, Weiss is just that certain of the world because she's already done research on all her classmates, and thus has already picked out her teammates to become the perfect hunter. huntress. So being paired with 3 other people who she's already burned her bridges with felt like a punishment. Why did she choose Beacon over Atlas? Well, it's because of Team Stark. They were the ones who initially inspired Weiss down this path, as when she was a little girl, her and her older sister Winter met Team Stark, because they had been tasked with protecting them while treading through some dangerous territory to a neighboring kingdom. This was of course minus Raven, as she had left already. So yeah, Weiss is perfectly aware of Ruby and Yang's parentage. With her time at Beacon, Weiss will need to learn that you can't always know people based on first impressions. And with her inferiority complex, opening up more, asking for help, and just, setting aside her biases. Learning how to be a normal girl, basically. And that she doesn't have everything figured out. Oh yes, one more thing. While the Shnee's semblance is going to remain exactly the same, I will explain why they seem to be the only ones in Remnant with a hereditary semblance. Why they can do so much cool stuff with their glyphs and their summons. This might also sound a little bit familiar, but like with Ruby, I'll save that for a different time. Now then, moving on. Blake Belladonna, or should I say Blythe Bet? That's right, I'm giving her a new fake name while she's attending school at Beacon. In addition to her new secret identity, I'm also giving her a new White Fang outfit. This is her pre-leaving the White Fang, where literally her design hasn't changed at all. Which I always thought to be quite strange for a deserter of an organization who loves to hunt down filthy traitors. In RiotRWBY, as a part of the White Fang, she now looks like this. She looks quite a bit more like Adam's student now, doesn't she? Personally, a redesign that I'm quite proud of for making. Anyways, due to a number of circumstances, including Blake emulating her master and almost never taking her mask off, only a few people in the White Fang actually knows what she looks like. So Blythe, or rather Blake, is going to be a little bit harder to find this time. After all, everyone would recognize the Belladonna name, wouldn't they? She's also got a bounty on her head due to being a filthy traitor. So that's another reason to have a fake ID. As for her parents, well, they're dead. Blake is an orphan. Callie died giving birth to Blake because of malnourishment. And Gira was shot to death by a Schnee desk company officer. So she definitely wasn't too keen on Weiss Schnee upon first meeting her. So Blake certainly has her own biases to sort out. With her uncle Tuscan apparently unable to take care of her, Blake had no one after her father's passing. So thus Adam Taurus took her in, raising her to be a fine White Fang soldier with a distaste for humans. So she's killed people, robbed people, beat them up. Not exactly an innocent little kitty cat. Regardless, she goes to Beacon based on something Gira told her once. That Beacon Academy is like a symbol of hope for the human populace, and he hoped that one day the White Fang would be that way for the Faunus. There was also another reason for Blake attending Beacon. The school does not actually accept predator class Faunus such as herself. So Blake thought pretending to be Blythe, a human, would be good, as the White Fang wouldn't think to look for her there, much less that she'd run off to be a huntress. However, a piece of Blake's heart broke when she left because she hoped Adam would join her. Even though she never said it to his face, Blake thought of Adam like a brother. So when he rejected her offer and stepped back, Blake knew she was going to have to go at this alone. So she's definitely not too keen on forming any new relationships with all of the drama, and she will fall deeper and deeper into despair until she questions what she's even doing anymore. So in the world of RiotRWBY, she's going to be a lost stray cat for quite some time, learning that she can't take everything on by herself and serve an actual punishment for her crimes instead of punishing herself. By my dialogue, you might know which backstory I think makes the least sense in the original. So before I get too heated just thinking about it, let's move on to the little sun dragon. Yang Xiaolong is a bit of a brat. In the early RiotRWBY volume, she's angry at everyone and everything. Her uncle's bad drinking habits also rubbed off on her, so she's also an alcoholic at 18, which makes her temperament even worse while intoxicated, frequently getting herself into bar fights, street brawls, and anything in between. Yang is the cause of a lot of headaches for her family, and one day she takes her fighting a bit too far, while trying to find out information about her biological mother who no one will speak about, beating up a shady businessman and his cronies on their turf, causing thousands of dollars worth of property damage. With Yang facing prison, her father Tai proposes something to her. If she goes to Beacon in the upcoming semester, graduates, and becomes a huntress, he will tell her about her biological mother and the reason why he and her Uncle Crow have kept their mouths shut. Otherwise, it is off to prison for Yang. Headmaster Osmond pulled some strings to make that even possible for her. So with that shoddy alternative, Yang is off to Beacon, joining her sister Ruby as a first year as the oldest kid in her class. Although she's definitely not happy about her predicament, so her string of getting into trouble continues at Beacon. Basically, what I want for Yang's character in this rewrite is what happened to her in the show, but in reverse. Starting off as a really angry brat, too attached to her own personal grudges in the past, and then growing into this fun-loving character who looks towards the future. Essentially growing growing into the big sister / motherly figure of Team RWBY. Or at least that is what I hope for her in this rewrite. There is going to be also some interesting lore concerning her true origins and nature. That has to do with her semblance and her mother, but I will be saving that for later down the line. In conclusion, what I want for Team RWBY is to be a sisterhood, all kind of broken and lost in one way or another, and then finding what they lack in each other, each girl helping the others improve. Over time, coming to view each other as family, including the 2 estranged sisters in the group, and you don't screw your family. Just making it perfectly clear on what I won't be having in this rewrite. None of that crazy shipping nonsense in RiotRWBY. Now, on to the next set of 4. Oh yeah, these guys will be getting increased roles in RiotRWBY later down the line. When this team was together, they were very popular back in the olden days, but since the split, they've faded into obscurity. Let's start off with their leader. Summer Rose was a sweet and angelic motherly figure to all who knew her, but that didn't mean she couldn't throw hands with the best of them. Her teammates admitting that when Summer put her best foot forward, she was like a happy-go-lucky demon on the battlefield, ravaging any threat that came across her path. As mentioned previously, in RiotRWBY, she's going to have Muera Rose as a weapon. When Summer Rose was alive, she was like a giant sunbeam to her teammates. But with her tragic death, the team split up for good and their relationship hasn't been the same since. There are going to be 2 things I do to her character to make her be an actual character. Giving her more screen time to showcase a basis for her personality, and her still having a presence in Remnant. She's not technically alive or dead, more like somewhere in between. One thing is for sure though, she died under some shady circumstances in RiotRWBY. And the truth about that death rocks everyone she once held dear to the core, making her death actually mean something in this universe. Moving on to the big sun dragon, Tai Xiaolong. He is a man with built-up guilt, demons, and a whole lot of baggage, trying very hard to keep what is left of his family together. Per husband's recommendation, that was partially the reason why he sent Yang away to Beacon, because if she didn't want to talk to him or Crow, then maybe she'd at least bond with her sister. See, 2 dudes raising 2 girls under the pretense that they had the same mother did not go very well, especially since Tai and Crow were barely keeping it together themselves. By his own admittance, Tai did try to push Crow out of their lives, because he held some animosity towards him because he blamed him for Summer's death, since Crow was the only one around when she died. Grappling with Crow's worsening drinking habits, it wasn't really a good situation, as they were always bickering with each other or fighting. In the case of Tai, while he never really forgave Crow, he at least got over himself, and the 2 repaired their friendship. Tai at least will get plenty of chances to repair his relationship with his eldest daughter, because Tai will be one of the people taking the Aesop's place in Volume 7, although he is not in Atlas entirely of his own free will. Better fate for him than just being stuck at home alone with the dog, and will give him some much needed screen time. He also will now have a semblance true to his namesake. Combustion. With enough buildup of kinetic energy, he can literally set the air on fire. Drawbacks being that it is extremely volatile and dangerous semblance, and he has to wait for kinetic energy to be built up to actually use it effectively. So Tai is a big fan of teaching people that you shouldn't have over-reliance on your semblance, and that you must listen and wait for the right time to use it. Now the next characters, Raven and Crow Branwen, the twins. I'm putting them together because they received the exact same basic changes. Their similarities are as follows. They now did not go to Beacon Academy to kill huntsmen, but rather were sent there by the then Shogunate to be studied by Ozpin, as the tribe wanted to know where they came from, because when they picked them up, Raven and Crow were essentially feral, covered by a strange black suit and weird white things. And after civilizing them a bit, they soon discovered that these children had 2 semblances. Their completely separate abilities of portals and bad luck stamps, and the power to turn into birds. In addition to that, they also appear to be grim magnets. So Crow and Raven slept separately from the rest of the tribe at a distance. So they pretty much were glued to each other up until the point that they met Tai and Summer, where they began to form their own thoughts and personalities, and act more, well, human. They actually agreed to a sort of mystic procedure that was going to be done by Ozpin, so that they could lead semi-regular lives, him sapping and redirecting their semblances in a hope that, well, their inherent traits will be lessened. This procedure was mostly successful, although not without its side effects, and this is where the twins' paths diverge. In regards to Raven, shortly after the procedure, she discovered she could no longer completely control herself, her semblance. The portals would just randomly appear and suck her and anyone else unlucky enough to be near her up. And in addition to having Yang, Raven decided, well, it's best to keep her distance. Her and Ty's relationship fell apart, but she would at least still often visit her daughter, keeping a steady relationship with the rest of her teammates. She didn't even mind with Ty and Summer getting together and starting a family because she adored Summer. However, when Yang was about 3, her behavior started to change drastically, becoming more shifty and a bit more distant. One day, she gets into a fight with her brother because he won't permanently come back to the tribe with her. Crow rejects the notion, and after that, she just ghosts them, leaving them with a message: please don't tell Yang about me. Raise her as Summer's daughter. And that's the last we see of Raven for quite a while. But her brother knew that she was watching, even if it was just from a distance. Speaking of Crow, after the procedure, unlike his sister, he was able to control his semblance more, being bad luck stamped, where he marks people with bad luck. Coupled with him refusing to go back to the tribe with his sister, Crow blamed himself for his sister's disappearance. With Summer dying and him blaming himself for her death as well, Crow spiraled into alcoholism. It kind of took him a while to bear his niece's presence, as they reminded him of the 2 women he loved the most, but couldn't see anymore. Time, however, even though the grief was still there, it was lessened, and thus Crow was able to form a pretty good relationship with one of his nieces, Ruby. Though not with Yang, because she had already decided she could not trust her family. Now, on to the last foursome for this video. Team Juniper, which I largely consider to be the secondary main characters of RWBY. But here in RiotRWBY, their roles will be greatly reduced. But don't worry though, their time in the spotlight will come. In regards to their leader, John Arc, I have decided I will be only changing one thing and absolutely nothing else. Mr. Arc will become quite the tank with his new semblance. Succession wall, bright beams of light that act as a defensive wall to keep out anything that tries to intrude. It will later evolve, of course, but for right now, this is the semblance he will unlock with Pyrrha. Speaking of Pyrrha, Nico's here. She's not going to have any changes at all, because, much like with John, I like what's there already for her character. For these 2, there is something to work with here. While their paths might diverge and change in the new story I'm preparing for RiotRWBY, at least for right now, they are perfect the way they are. Although Pyrrha will still meet her demise in Volume 3, that will not be the end for her. As for the second half of this team, Nora, Valkyrie, and Lyren are going to receive one crucial change. That will change their path considerably in RiotRWBY, and even their personalities. Who ever heard of the Mistralian dolls? They are an odd sort in Mistral, contracted by various mafia families for quite a lot of missions and services. The dolls are said to have no existence of their own, and are trained to be as such. Any semblance of a personality, likes or dislikes, are all fake. If you see one of these dolls, you might never even know. There are also 2 other existing characters that I will call upon to fulfill the role of dolls. But for now, this is all I will divulge. Now it's time to rewrite some villainy. This is an all-encompassing and rapid-fire part, because, well, there's a lot of RWBY villains. And because I can, I'm starting off with Neo. I have decided to make her disguise portion of her semblance a bit more difficult to set up, using the power of imagination and her own aura. She can make wearable disguises for the people around her. However, this does take a lot out of her, so that's why when you first meet her in RiotRWBY, she's going to be bedridden. Now, to include Roman Torchwick in the mix, I'm going to have the pair be the 2 younger children in the Brunswick Farms photo, because I just like the theory that much. When Neo was a child on the farm, she got into an accident where she hit her head, and ever since, she can't quite talk right. So she simply chooses not to talk, except around Roman, who seems to always understand what she's saying. They're going to have a little birdie guide them on becoming Mistralian crime lords, but that's it for their major changes. Moving on! Team Emna is going to be a new team entering the Vital Festival, having Emerald Sistrai, Mercury Black, Neapolitan, and a new member, Demas Bells, as its members. And Demas Bell is a new design for an existing character in RiotRWBY. Who is he? Well, the answer is in the name, and that's all I will say on that. Next, the Court of Salem, the main bad guys. With these particular band of baddies, there is something to work with here. I'll just be changing around their motivations and backstories, which literally almost never make sense. And this is not more clear than with the head honcho herself, Salem, whose backstory literally contradicts itself. Here's the basic gist. Salem was one of the only complete humans to be born with with all 6 arcana, making her immensely powerful. Ozpin still breaks her out, she falls in love with him, but the love is not reciprocated before he dies. While underneath his tutelage as a magical understudy, Salem still pleads to the gods, although they're different this time, and still gets rejected. But this time she takes the relics and abuses their power to bring back Ozpin. And after that, the world becomes a dumpster fire because you shouldn't use relics that actually dictate the balance of the world. Though this hardly deterred Salem, who thought she could do better than the gods who came before her, draining the life force of all the remaining Grimm to have the ghastly form you see today to prolong her own life, establishing a kingdom that revered her as a goddess, using the relics to make them obey and be happy. While outside the walls, the rest of the world burned. She meets Ozpin, they have their family, and well, due to a simple misunderstanding and her own mental state, Salem still kills them all, which kinda drives her even more insane than she already was, going on various murderous rampages. But in present day, she's calmed down a bit, mostly because of her being bedridden due to the rapidly deteriorating state of her own body. Nowadays, though, she's looking to do the exact same thing she did before, gathering up all the relics and combining them, destroying the current remnant and demaking the world back to the place where she thought she was the happiest. Every one of her loyal followers, once this is all over, will get their own pockets full of sunshine in her new world. Next evil crazy person. Cinderfall, a woman who carries herself with grace and resolve. On the chopping block, her backstory will be chopped in half, so to speak. She will still train with Rose, desiring to become a huntress. She will still kill a good portion of her family, but after thinking that they killed Rose, however, the first part about her being a washed-up orphan sent to basically work as a slave will be given to Tyrion. More on that in a minute. Instead, Cinder will be a lonely and sheltered girl, sent to live with her aunt and uncle after her parents tragically pass away due to varying circumstances, who has already decided her path for her. One day, she is visited by a floating orb with red tentacles that tells her that it is her friend. The orb continuously pokes and prods her into doing bad things. This is, of course, Salem acting under the guise of a playmate, who eventually convinces Cinder to join her, and killing her family. And that is the origin of the Cinder that we all know and loathe. Her wish being to take away all the power in the world from a system she thinks screwed her over. Now, next evil crazy person. Tyrion Callos, a serial killer assassin of the court, will be taking Cinder's place as the washed-up orphan who's sold into slavery. Worked to the bone until he's paid off his initial cost. Never really treated well, receiving daily beatings if he did something wrong. As Tyrion puts it, it was a constant cycle of pain and agony, until one day something inside of him snapped and he felt nothing but joy. Massacring the entire restaurant and developing a joy for killing. He realized he could never replicate that same joy he got from having his first kills, at least until he met Salem. Killing for his queen has brought Tyrion much joy, and all he wants now is to continue his work for her and remain by her side, making her happy. Overall, quite a nutcase, especially with his new semblance. I've named it Fear Factor. A semblance where if Tyrion looks you in the eye, he can freeze you in your place. Think of it as Tyrion playing the role of your sleep paralysis demon. However, the spell is broken if he breaks eye contact, so he mainly uses it when he wants to take a photo of someone who knows they're about to die, or mess with people. Alrighty, time for the next bad guy. Arthur Watts, the hacker/scientist of the group, at least when it comes to all manner of robotics and machinery. Unlike the rest of the court, he's doing this purely for his own ego. He knows his brain is superior to that of Ironwood and the rest of the Atlan smuts, so teaming up with a crazy witch lady to prove that is worth it to him. Watts doesn't really have a particular wish in mind. All he wants is that after he's proved his superiority, to continue his work in peace, without worrying about any sort of silly little limits like the law. Yep, that's him, the constant one-upper of the court. Now, next evil bad guy. Or should I say, the most good evil bad guy. The basis for what I thought Hazel was going to be always intrigued me. A man on the bad guys team that isn't actually a bad guy. So thus, a big, albeit simple change is in order for him. Hazel was an 18-year-old boy living with his younger sister Gretchen, living a fairly peaceful and quaint life. However, one fateful day, Hazel went out to do some errands for them. When he came back, half the village was trashed and smoldering. He ran to their home, discovering it destroyed, and Gretchen was writhing around in pain, not seeming to know where she was. While Hazel did try to get his younger sister some help, she slowly became a vegetable. Doctors discovered that Gretchen's aura had been almost completely drained, yet somehow she was still alive. No matter where Hazel went, it was always the same thing. He needed to let his sister go. A few years passed, and Hazel had resorted to carrying around his sister in an Atlan medical box. One day, he was looking for herbs to rejuvenate his sister by climbing on a mountain to get them, and that is when he met Salem. Or rather, a seer that Salem decided to speak through because she was curious, asking why he needed the herbs. After overcoming Overcoming the initial shock of seeing a Grimm speak, Hazel gave his reply. There was a slight pause, and Hazel could hear something that was similar to crying. She then said such suffering won't exist in her new world. Hazel asked what she meant by that, and Salem responded saying she's escorting someone who's just as lost as he is. If he would like to know more about ending his sister's suffering, he can come along. This led Hazel to a grim horse-drawn carriage with no rider. A young girl was inside, and Hazel got in with Gretchen. Shortly thereafter, they arrived at her castle, which is where he finally meets the ghastly true visage of Salem. She tells him all about her plans, saying that when she combined all the relics before, she was able to bring back someone from the dead. Restoring someone's aura should be no problem for her. But Hazel would need to swear his loyalty and help her accomplish her plans. Only then will she be able to grant his wish, even offering to demake the world for them so that they could revert back to childhood. Some 12-odd years later, that promise is what keeps Hazel going. Although he expresses extreme distaste in having to hurt anyone, especially if he sees no reason for it, which is how he sort of views Salem's plans for Ruby, even expressing discontent towards Ozpin, telling Ruby that he's lying to her. However, he will hurt people if he must, and this code of his is why he butts heads frequently with Tyrion, who just kills indiscriminately. But still, he will do what he must for his little sister, who remains comatose and stabilized in Evernight Castle to this day. Now, next evil bad guy. Oh, right, I mean bad guys. I always wondered about something in RWBY. In Volume 4, when they were all having their evil meeting, there were 2 empty seats on the court. Still have no idea who they are, so I'll be adding the missing seats myself. Let's go. Dr. Merlot, the mad scientist. He is a RWBY character who has only appeared in the game RWBY Grim Eclipse, which is a subpar game made by Rooster Teeth. But that is not important here. What is important is what I will do with him in RiotRWBY. Now then, to go back in time, 20 or so years ago, Dr. Merlot was a very successful scientist and businessman, starting up Merlot Industries from scratch, and providing various technological and biological advancements to the people of all kingdoms. His main project, however, was experimenting on Grimm to see if they could turn on each other, thus negating the need to have so many huntsmen for Grimm-related activities. Ozpin was certainly intrigued by this endeavor, having recently become a professor at Beacon Academy, giving a lot of generous contributions to Merlot's research, even confiding in him about the true state of the world and saying that he's putting a lot of hope on Merlot. Although Ozpin did not realize that the good doctor was actually pretty nuts. In addition to that project, he wanted to make Grimm super weapons that would basically police Remnant in order to truly perfect Grimm evolution. And frankly, well, the International Huntsman Guild thought this insane. So Atlas sent out some of their huntsmen on behalf of the guild to shut this down. He actually trapped them on the island and made them fight his experiments. News spread and Ozpin thought this way too far, so he unfortunately had to send huntsmen against his friend. Merlot did not take too kindly to this, thinking, well, maybe Salem would appreciate my work better. So after allowing everyone to leave, he blows the whole thing to Kingdom Come. And that's the last we see of him for quite a while. Unlike the rest of the court, Merlot, while initially joining for petty reasons, has a purely scientific arrangement in mind with Salem. He gets free reign of the Grimm pools and a facility at Evernight Castle, but Merlot has to provide Salem treatments in an attempt to restore her. While he's not playing Salem's in-house doctor, Merlot is realizing his new dream. The dream of perfect evolution, where Grimm and humans evolve as one. And once Salem's plan is complete, Merlot will stay behind in the destroyed remnant and be its savior. That's what I got for this crazy doctor. Now, on to the last member of this evil court. You might know her from my Riot Kitty Cafe streams. She looks cute, but will actually eat you if she's hungry. It's Naive, my very first RiotRWBY OC and the only never harsh Grimm and Remnant, which is a Grimm species that I created that is basically a harpy Grimm. Naive can speak and understand human speech and is capable of flight. However, as far as she knows, she is the only one of her kind. From the first memory Naive can recall, she was alone. Too humanoid for Grimm and too feral for humans. Naive had to teach herself to survive. It wasn't until she met Salem that she began to realize her inner desire for a family. Salem began to realize what she must do for the state of the world, and thus taught Naive a great many things. So Naive views her as a motherly figure and will do anything for her, basically. Her simple wish now, though, is to see her lady's wish and hers come true, for them to both gain a family. She will actually gain a family member in this rewrite, but not in the way one will typically expect. Alrighty, now for the all-encompassing change. Salem has taught her followers a new trick, the Hex Arcana Blood Art, by giving them a magic crest so that even incomplete humans can use complete magic. The effect is anyone who uses it will become a Grim beacon and attract Grim to their location. And if they are skilled enough at tapping into their negative emotions, they can even control Grim and ride them. I will go more in depth with Arcana in a later video, so be on the lookout for that. What they are essentially is the origin of all semblances, and what complete humans used in the ancient world. Only Salem and the maidens can use them now, though. Alrighty, on to the next band of baddies. The White Fang shall be gone in more in depth in a later video. Character-wise, though, after their previous leader, Gira Belladonna, died, they went in a more radical, militant direction. 3 particular faunas stepped up to be their leaders. The first one is Liam Albine, father to the Albine twins in Volume 4. His kids and Blake played together when they were children. The second one is Marianne Lambosa, mother to Fiona in Volume 7, the latter of whom is currently aged down and is living with her mother on Menagerie. If there's any faunus in Remnant who has the most insane hatred of humans, it's her. To the point where when she gave birth to twins, one faunus and one human, she ordered a young faunus to, well, kill the baby. Although he didn't go through with it, so him and the child are still at large. And the third one, well, he's a secret. He is also related to an existing character, much like the other two, but I shall not further elaborate. Now, next White Fang authority figure, Sienna Khan, adopted niece of Liam Albine and being groomed to take his place in the leader circle. Sienna also looked after the Albine twins when Liam was busy. Being quite the fine warrior herself, she has a Darwinistic outlook on society. The strong shall survive and the weak shall perish, so you must be strong in order to prevent yourself from being snuffed out. So she is quite in favor of teaching children on Menagerie at a very young age how to fight and kill people. She also applies this to her relationships as well. Sienna, while knowing that Blake is a capable warrior, thought of her as weak-minded, and thus is happy that she's gone because she would have made the White Fang weak. Another example is her hunt for a potential mate. In order to have the highest probability of having strong children, she must also have a strong mate, and has suggested to Adam that they mate. But Adam doesn't really know what to do with this information as he's never been in a relationship before. Speaking of Adam Taurus is a general in the White Fang, carrying a lot of baggage underneath that mask of his. Growing up in the Shnidus company Atlan Mines, Adam always had to fight for everything, a place to sleep, something to eat or drink. The mines were the only place Adam knew for quite a while, and thus to this day he still doesn't know his birthday or his exact age. One day Adam meets a woman who claims to be his mother. While she doesn't have any evidence for this claim, Adam is inclined to believe her, as she was the first person Adam had seen that sported the same distinctive hair he had. The woman gives him a whole lot of dough, telling the boy that if he gives this to the inspection manager on his next inspection, he will be free. Adam jumps at the opportunity, but is sadly betrayed. The inspection manager takes Adam's money and he tries to fight to get it back. This is when he's branded and, well, he's put on a shipment to Menagerie, because now he's an inept worker. Being, of course, where he met Gira and Blake for the first time. Ever since then, Adam has had this inner anger and bloodlust within him, reinforced by the mistreatment and deaths of many other faunas he witnessed, including Gira himself. This gives him a strong sense of justice and purpose. Everything that Adam does is for the sake of the White Fang and Menagerie. But like his student before him, Adam will come to question what he's even doing anymore, despairing over some unkind truths. One more thing. Adam even left the island at one point because he couldn't control his semblance, seeking out someone who apparently had the same problem as he did, but who had a weapon that would mitigate the issue. Adam obviously succeeded in his quest and learned how to control his semblance more using his weapon, becoming a formidable warrior. If he doesn't use the sword in tandem with his semblance, it is more akin to a small nuke, releasing aura from all over his body. And he does not want to hurt the people he's fighting alongside with, so he rarely, if ever, does this. So if Adam uses his semblance without his sword, someone must have really pissed him off. Now onto the final major antagonist of RiotRWBY, the Branwen tribe. Yes, I'm making these guys actual antagonists instead of a weird obstacle that disappeared after half a season. Again, more in depth depth in a later video. When rewriting the Branwen tribe, I decided to give them an urban fantasy shogunite vibe with a strong sense of tribal ties. I even redesigned one of their more notable members to fit this new aesthetic, where everyone's last name is Branwen, where the tribe determines that family is decided by your tribal bonds with your comrades, where you must complete hellish objectives in order to join, such as fighting a grim and restraining it with your bare hands and making a weapon out of it. But most importantly, they now all have a clear objective involving the maidens, spurred on by their shogunite raven Branwen. Now, time for the guys of the side. Next. This side guy is an ultra rapid fire part where I'll be going over the side characters that I've changed enough to warrant talking about. 1, 2, 3, go! Yatsuhashi Daiichi. A member of Team Coffee, he will get more importance in the story. He is in a lot of pain due to a mysterious affliction that is slowly getting worse over time, with his teammates desperately trying to find a cure. It's why Yatsuhashi decided to attend Beacon in the first place, hoping he can find a way to slow or stop the process. With the possibility of failure, he tries to do as much good as he can as a huntsman in training, while also being secretly connected to some of the bad guys. Next, the matriarch of the Schnees, Willow Schnee, has been going through a bit of a rough patch. After the butcher incident with her family, she was physically fine, but mentally she was not, suffering from schizophrenia and paranoid delusions, such as thinking a witch was coming to get her, that everyone around her was dead, and not knowing who anyone was and attacking them. During one of these especially crazed outbursts, Jox was forced to lock Willow in a tea room as he tried to get a hold of one of the many doctors attending to his family. Little Weiss, who had just gotten home for the first time, didn't really know what was going on with her mother, so she took the key and decided to sneak into the tea room to see her. That is when Willow freaked out and threw a teacup in her direction. It shattered, and that is how Weiss got her scar, and when she learned how to be more distant and less affectionate towards her mother. So that is why it came to Weiss as a shock when she returned home post Volume 3, seeing a happier, less delusional version of her mother, with a new addition to the Schnee household, which leads into Whitley Schnee, the youngest of the Schnee children, now going to be made even younger. So, bippity boppity boo. He is now a baby. Because in all honesty, the show pretends he doesn't exist half the time. And when he does exist, well, he just gets treated like dirt. So I feel bad for the kid. All he needs to worry about now is being a baby and doing baby things. Being born while Weiss is away at Beacon. And all that needs to be known about that right now is this.
Get one thing straight here. I was giving her the sex!
Ozpin/Ozma gets a little change to bring the story back down to remnant. Instead of being gifted reincarnation from gods on a mission to unite humanity, he now receives the gift of perfect memory from Salem, which now causes him to reincarnate with all of his memories intact, and he can never ever forget any of it. It's been more of a curse to Ozpin in the long run, and he can't even be granted the peace of death anymore. I will explain later how this all happened, but for now, unintentionally and unbeknownst to him, Ozpin had accidentally passed this very strange semblance down. Kind of, and that leads into... I mean new in the biggest air quotes possible, because they already exist in the world of RWBY, except with nothing that actually makes them actual characters. Behold, Salem and Ozpin's daughters, joining their father as infinitely reincarnating individuals who remember their past lives. However, unlike their father, who assimilates perfectly into his new reincarnations with no trouble at all, and usually is reborn normally, they randomly zip around to anyone female and remnant, and most of the time imperfectly assimilate, something akin to a split personality, with their memories seeping over into their host's memories, so you have a lot of maidens thinking that they've gone insane, until the girls awaken in their new lives, their parents coming to the conclusion that they each awaken with a specific powerful emotion that their host feels. Now, addressing the elephant in the room. Obviously, if they're going to be actual characters, they need to have names. So behold, the replacements for the maidens. First up, we have Paradoin the Summer Maiden, the most tomboyish of the girls. She loves getting her hands dirty, but has put up a front that she doesn't care about anyone or anything anymore. Next is Elena the Winter Maiden, who's quite the bookworm and very studious. To the point of annoyance, Elena keeps trying to be the motherly replacement for her sister, but she now leads a lonely life of eternal solitude as she's on a different plane of existence from the rest of Remnant. Next is the youngest of the girls, Dorothea the Spring Maiden, who seemed to be always laughing, giggling, and smiling in her first life, always finding out ways to be creative in her playtime, goofing off and having fun. After simply existing for thousands of years, she's become the most distant distant and cynical of the girl, trying to find a way to make it all end for her sisters, so they stop reincarnating erratically over and over again. Though in the last 2 decades or so, she's dropped off the face of the planet. Her family doesn't know where she is, and Ozpin is quite worried about her. The final sister is Aetha, the Fall Maiden, who is really the only one who has maintained a consistent relationship with her father, experimenting with a wide variety of things to maybe undo what has been done, so they can maybe reincarnate normally. That's the basic gist of their personalities and where they're at right now in RiotRWBY. Now to the final part we go! With so many faces, sacrifices must be made in order to have this cast be a manageable size. The following characters I'm mentioning will be chucked into the abyss, in the void of non-existence. Begin culling now. Oscar Pine gets the cut. I don't particularly dislike him, I just couldn't find a use for him. Ozpin is going to be forcefully put into a body obtained by Salem in Volume 4. So his role is already taken. Basically, I'll just be using his name for something and nothing more. Moving down the list we have... You know what? This is probably the last time I'm going to talk about this character. So why not just lay everything bare? I hate this character. To me, she's just a fusion of Adam and Yang. She's just a prop to trot around while neither are in the same room as Blake, replacing any development that they should have gotten. For Adam, I would wager it was any potential backstory he could have had, as well as any conflicting beliefs he had about the White Fang. For Yang, it was resolving the feelings that Blake had abandoned her team, which disappeared after the girls reunited in Volume 5. So yeah, I hate replacement characters. I hate it when characters are created for the sole purpose of replacing others, because the creators, writers, or executives, or whoever else decided, hey, I hate this character now. Let's create a new, better version that we all like and throw the existing character in the garbage. That is what I feel about Illy, and that is why, without any hesitation whatsoever, she was the first cut I made to RiotRWBY. Now for something a little bit more mild after that rant. He and Dudley get the cut. I don't blame anyone if they don't remember these two. I only remember because of the Alice in Wonderland reference. But I decided, let's replace them with Cardin and one of his teammates from Team Cardinal. I just thought, hey, why not showcase a more humble version of Cardin after the fall of Beacon? To say that he's not dead after all. That's about it, really. Next up, we have Rhea Calavera getting the cut. Much like with Oscar, I just couldn't find a use for her. Even if I hadn't cut out Silver Eyes, I would probably still cut her out. Because her, in my opinion, only significant role to the story, which was teaching Ruby about her Silver Eyes, could have been fulfilled by Ruby's family, or most importantly, Professor Ozpin. So sorry, Maria, your younger form might be badass and cool looking, but it's not enough for me to keep you around in this story. Now, who do we have next? Ah, yes, the Aesops kind of get the cut. Elm, Vine, and Clover get the cut, while Marrow and Harriet get to stay in existence. These guys, I simply feel, just bloated, already bloated seasons to the very brink of destruction. So I decided to trim the fat, so to speak, picking Marrow and Harriet because I thought they both had the most distinctive personalities out of the 5. And thus will be of assistance in Volume 7 and 8. Speaking of Volume 7 and 8, here's another organization getting the cut. The Happy Huntresses. Screw these walking contradictions. Let me ask you guys this. If their leader, Robin Hill, thought the system worked, why were they trying to halt military operations? If Robin doesn't think the system works, why is she running for office? These are the questions one must ask sometimes, with no answer given as far as I know of. I refuse to work with RWBY characters whose foundations were flawed from the start. Except for Fiona, because she's cute and adorable. What can I say? I never thought I would have a soft spot for a lamb girl. Now, the next one on the excommunicated list is a little strange, because I'm technically cutting a character while simultaneously not cutting a character. Just bear with me. Penny Paw Dana from Volume 7 to Volume 8 gets the cut, but, emphasis on the but, she will be replaced with a new Penny. After the fall of Beacon and the original Penny's death, the Atlan government strong-armed Pietro into essentially giving up the rights for the schematics of the Penny Project. With these schematics, they built a new Penny, a military Penny. Although she has almost the exact same abilities as the original Penny, she is devoid of any personality or memories that she had, being much more soldier-like in her demeanor. She will come to be of assistance in Team Juniper, which will be awkward for them, not for her. Now, I like Penny, but her return in Volume 7 makes her death in Volume 3 retroactively meaningless, because there was nothing that changed. Now, with Military Penny, something will change, and there's going to be new tension between RWBY and Ironwood, and a new dynamic gimmick for those who knew the original Penny. Now let's see. Yes. We finally arrived to the last part of the last section of the chopping block. At the end of this long ride of a video, we have the Relic Guardians getting cut. Except for Jin. With Ambrose being revealed as the Relic of Creation's Guardian, now I'm expecting 2 more blue genies, who look like slightly modified versions of their predecessors. I find that design philosophy to be dull, to be perfectly honest. So I've decided to cut 3 out of the 4 and spice things up a little bit. Now, sometime after Salem rampaged and Destroyer Kingdom, Ozpin discovered that the relics have activated some sort of hidden self-defense mechanism, binding morphed versions of souls to their functions. Those who died with regrets and still have unfinished business in the world of Remnant. In order for one to access their full power, one must know the true form of the respective Relic Guardian, calling out their true name and what they meant to them in their past life, with many being binded and set free over the years. Bringing back peeps from the dead for this one. If you guys remember a certain Volume 6 theory involving Jin when she first appeared, then you already know who she's gonna be. That's all the information I'll give, however. Oh, this is gonna be so fun to write and draw. With that, it looks like we've come to the end of the video. This rewrite project of mine is honestly a goodbye letter to a show I indulged in as a teenager. But regardless of that, let me know your guys' thoughts on all my scatterbrained ideas for this rewrite. With that, Bright Kitty is signing out. See you on the flip side in the world of RiotRWBY for the Worldo videos.